So good evening. Welcome to Training Tuesday. I am Bill Brown. I am the Director of Innovative Evangelism for the Baltimore-Washington Conference and also do hands-on work with the Peninsula Delaware Conference. Tonight we are joined by Bill Westbrook, the Director of Administrative Services for the Peninsula Delaware Conference, and Dave Scholler, the Business Data Analyst with the Baltimore-Washington Conference. And it is a joy to welcome our siblings from both annual conferences tonight. We're going to open up with a word of prayer. I'm going to give some instructions, and then we will turn this over to Bill and Dave. So if you all would take a moment with me as we bow our heads and unite our hearts in prayer. Holy and living God, we give you thanks for gathering us together from around our two annual conferences. And even though we may not be in one another's presence physically, we are with one another in spirit. And we know, oh God, that wherever two or three are gathered in your name, you are present among us. So even though we may be spread out, you are present with us. And for that, we give you thanks. I thank you for Bill and Dave and their ability to help us interpret numbers and collect data so that we can be about the business of tracking how we are making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. So we ask for your blessing upon them as they present to us tonight. And we ask for your spirit to be upon all of us to give us insight, wisdom, and understanding in the name of Jesus. Amen. A couple of housekeeping items. So first of all, tonight is being recorded. And whatever PowerPoint presentations that are used tonight and the recording will be posted to both annual conference websites, usually by the end of the week, but sometimes it does take us a little bit longer. If you have a question, I already noticed some people have their hands up, and you do not need to raise your hand. If you have a question, please use the Q&A feature. And we'll be getting to our questions at the end of the presentation, and we'll get to as many questions as we have time for. And with that information, I will monitor the Q&A, but other than that, Bill and Dave, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you, Bill. So I'm going to lead off tonight, and I welcome everybody here. We have a very big crowd, so that is great to hear. Good to know that there's interest in learning the new system. This is the first time that the Methodist Church has changed their stats collection system, and I think it's probably about 20 years or so. So this is a big deal for them. I want to report, and I'm happy to report right off the bat, that having used it extensively for the last month or two, learning it myself, it is very user-friendly. I think they did a very good job at putting it together. So you can breathe a sigh of relief there. So I want to kind of go through the evening. So I will start off and I will lead you through the process of using the new system, getting into the system, initially creating your user account, and just give you a walkthrough of what everything looks like, some key areas that you're going to want to pay attention to, getting copies of your statistics, some data entry icons that you want to pay attention to, just how it works. Again, it is not dramatically different than Ezra, but there's some things that are definitely different. After I do that walkthrough, I will start off walking through table 1, and then Bill will pick up from there and go through table 2 and table 3. I do want to be respectful of people's time and let you know that if you are a hardened statistical reporting veteran for your church and you know these stats inside and out and up and down, feel free to, after you have become accustomed to and learn about the new system, feel free to drop off. We will try to limit the new system talk to the very beginning, so that you don't have to sit through the whole statistical reporting webinar unless you would like to. We will have questions at the end. Because obviously we have two different conferences that are joining us, it would be very helpful if, as you ask questions, it'll be helpful for Bill and I, and also Bill Brown. Make sure you lead off your question with the conference you're from. You can just put BWC or PDC or however you would like to write it out. The key reason for that is there are a few variances to our statistical reports and how we calculate things across the different conferences. So it will help knowing where you're coming from, and will help Bill and I help Bill Brown direct the question to either Bill Westbrook or myself. So please do that when you are putting in your questions. So just a real brief introduction. Statistical reporting, especially if you're new to it, it involves three primary tables. Table 1 is all about membership and participation. This is where church is recording their professing members, confirmands, baptisms, enrollment in all of Sunday school classes, mission work, anything that involves participation and membership is all recorded in Table 1. Table 2 is where church will report their assets and expenses. Typically, this is the case for both Pendel and the Baltimore-Washington Conference. The information in Table 2, some of it is used in your apportionment or mission share calculation. So it's always good to pay close attention to some of those areas, as any kind of misreporting can result in overpayment of a mission share that you might not discover right away. So some of those line items, especially the classification of things, can be confusing if you have not done this before. So Bill will walk through some of those gotcha areas, especially capital expenses and versus operating expenses in some of those areas. Table 3 is the most straightforward of all the tables. That's where the church will record its income from various sources. It'll be a breakdown of income that's used for budget, investment income, memorials, bequests, all those types of things, any kind of loans or grants, all that's done on Table 3. So in addition to those core tables that the Methodist Church defines, conferences are also able to add supplemental tables if they would like to do so. They can also add questions to the core statistical report questions. The core questions can't be modified, but a conference can add questions for clarity to kind of break things out. Pendel does that, and we do as well. Pendel has additional questions. We have a few additional questions, and we have a small supplemental table that's kind of a breakout of one of the questions. So that can be done. Thankfully, neither of us add too much. It's just really enough to help in the data entry process to help categorize expenses that then kind of roll up to a summary line. So all of the statistical reporting is done on the GCFA website, and keep that in mind. And both conferences, we both have websites where folks go to do lots of things, registering for events, a portal where you might look up something for your church. And it's a common issue where when it comes time to this year, the church user may go to what they're used to using, which is the conference website. For us, it's Arena. Pendel uses Brick River, and they will go and look for where they kind of start the stats process. So just keep in mind that it is a separate website that's maintained by the denomination GCFA, and it's used by about 80% of the conferences to collect their statistical information. So it's definitely a different place. Keep that in mind. We'll tell you where it is. So all of this statistical information is, like everything else in our denomination, is mandated by the Book of Discipline. And it really, the statistical information reporting kind of comes at the very end of the church conference season. And this information is used in a wide variety of ways. Obviously, it's used to evaluate the vitality of your conference. That is important because every conference has programs to help churches resource loans and grants. And the way that churches are identified for that is through their statistical reporting, their self-reported numbers. So we also look to draw comparisons between areas to see if there's certain areas that may need more resourcing. There's also at the denominational level, comparisons are drawn between conferences as well. Again, these statistics are done to compute your church's mission share. And obviously, especially this time of year, statistics are also used to help during appointment season to see what pastors will be the best fit for churches, to see how pastors are doing in churches. All that is made possible by the statistical reports. So these reports are collected for about the next month or so. Pendel and us, we have similar deadline dates, but keep in mind that we each have a website that has key information about all of that. So I encourage you to visit your conference's website. And I also encourage you to keep in mind and pay attention to accuracy with when you're reporting these statistics. Conferences use this information in addition to the reasons I laid out. One of the most important reasons for this is to help the conference set their budget for the upcoming years. So we typically have a very tight season where this information comes in, we evaluate how churches are doing, and that information is used to set budgets. If information is not put in accurately, it makes it difficult, makes it a moving target to kind of project budget. So again, we ask you to always pay attention, especially in some of the financial areas, to make sure that you're taking care and concern with your answers. With that in mind, the statistical reports, they will have error checking and alerts set up that will help identify areas where if there is a dramatic change year to year, or if there was a figure entered in the year prior and then you're putting in a 0 this year, just like Ezra, the system will flag those lines and will ask you to put a brief note in just explaining what the difference is. This new system, I believe, has a very short note area. We always ask that, short and sweet really is fine. We just want to make sure that you're aware of the change. Obviously, there's all types of things that creep up that will cause some year-to-year changes, COVID being one of them. When that year happened, there were all kinds of dramatic changes in worship numbers and that sort of thing. So we realize there's reasons for it, and the system will prompt you to address that and just kind of put a brief note in so that we know you know about it. And sometimes this helps you kind of catch errors as you go. So that's important as well. So with that, I will jump into and share my screen. Okay. So as I mentioned, the reporting website is now called AC Stats. The web address for that is stats.gcfa.org. Ezra is no longer being in use, so make sure you can clear that off of your favorites list. So again, stats.gcfa.org. We will try to put that in all of our training materials. This is the homepage for the stats system that you'll see when you first log in. There is a similar system than we had for Ezra, in that there is a starting universal password for all churches. Pendel and we have different universal password. Again, that's on all of our website and resources that we'll be emailing to you. The biggest difference on the login, and this may trip some folks up, is on the username for the church. When you do your initial login and kind of user account setup, the stats system asks for the church's general church number, or GCNO. Most local churches are familiar with their local church alignment number, which is usually a 4 or 5 digit number. But this new system is asking for your general church number. Bill and I are taking different approaches to help you get that number. Bill is emailing churches that information. We have a lookup feature that's linked to from our stats webpage that will allow you to takes you to a screen where you can just enter in your local alignment number, and it will immediately give you your GCNO or your church general church number. So keep that in mind. If you're having repeated trouble getting in, it may be because especially if you're a longtime user, it may be because you're used to putting in that local alignment number. So what I'm going to do here is walk you through the setup as if I'm a new user. There's a test church that's set up here in the system. So I'm going to put in this test church's number, which is all zeros. And again, the password will be the same for your conference for all churches to get that initial setup done. There is a little eyeball icon that will help you view the password. Sometimes it's nice to view it as you type it. So keep that in mind if you'd like to see what you typed in before you click login. That's what those little icons there are on your right. So I have entered into my church. This is the screen that you will get. If you happen to be the first person logging in for your church, you will not see any registered users listed there underneath of your church. If that is the case, you'll click on I'm not listed. Once you do this the first time, you will be able to log in with your own username and password. Or if you come back in, if you forget your password, you can always come back in using, again, the church's general church number and the universal password when you started out. And if you see yourself listed after you've registered, you can just simply click "This is me," and it will help you jump into the system very quickly if you've forgotten your password. So in this case, I'm teaching you how to set things up new. So I'm going to click I am not listed, and it will take you to a user registration screen. Church roll. This system is an improvement over Ezra in that Ezra had a very limited number of people, usually one or two, that could register for a church. That was not a problem with small churches, but in larger churches where you may have a committee head, membership committee person may be focusing on table 1, finance person may be focusing on table 2, pastor may be doing something else. This system has quite a few position listings shown, and you can have multiple people in each listing. So there really is no limit to the number of people that can register under a church and have access to the system. I always encourage churches, even though you can register and have a lot of people going into the system, I do strongly encourage, it's usually a better method to distribute via paper or PDF to, say, the membership chair, get their information back, and then have 1 or maybe 2 people who are the key people that will be doing the actual data entry into the system. It sometimes gets confusing. People forget what area of the stats that they're in charge of. You have to be the tech support person sometimes for your church if people can forget how to get in. And it does sometimes increase the chance that there may be an error or somebody else may overwrite somebody else's information. So again, more options for more people, but I always encourage the smallest set of people that you think is prudent for your church to get the job done. So in this case, I'm going to set myself up as pastor. The information where you see the asterisks, those are all required fields. I definitely encourage you to enter that information, especially your phone number. The address, city, state is helpful, but certainly not required. The contact information via email and telephone is what's the most important, and that is why it is a required field. So the password can be anything of your choosing. There is down here, it's hard to read, but some guidance as to what the password requirements are. It says that it must be 8 characters long with at least 1 letter, number, and 1 special character. So I'm going to go ahead and put something in. This is an area where clicking on these little eyeball icons may be nice, just so that you make sure that you put in your password the same in both areas. It'll prevent you from getting a dreaded these passwords don't match. And bear with me, I need to move a Zoom bar out of the way. Okay, so now that I've put in my required information and put in a password, and I'm going to actually write it down because I will probably forget, and I encourage you to do the same. I'm going to click register with local church, and it says my emails. Apparently I need to put in a different John Doe. Okay, so you will get, if everything goes in correctly, you will get this successful registration. You are now going to be listed as a person underneath of your local church. And once you get that success message, you can just click on continue, and it will take you into the system. So you will first be put into a page that shows your church details. You will see some or all of these fields depending on the conference setting. Typically, it's just the basic information. This test church is showing everything. Bill and I, I'm sure, have set different levels of information that's available. If the field is visible and it's something that you can click into, that is something that you can edit. If it's just in gray, it's just there for your review, and nothing needs to be done to it. Once you get to the screen, you're going to want to scroll down to the bottom and click annual report, or the same link here in this navigation bar, annual statistics, will take you to the same area. So I'm going to use the button this time. And now you're into the annual statistics or annual report, depending on how it's referenced, for the church. There's some instructions here that gives you just kind of a brief overview of the main controls. This autosave enabled is going to be one of the most important things to pay attention to. This system is saving your data all the time. This is a big departure from Ezra, where we constantly remind you to make sure you save your work, so you don't lose your information. Is every time you click tab and tab out of a field in this new system, whatever you entered in that last field is saved. So keep that in mind. There is no save button at the top of each table. The only button there is a submit button, and that is what you use at the very end of the process when you are ready to submit your statistics to the conference. It does look like and similar to a save button, so make sure that out of habit you're not going to click that to save your work. You will be given a kind of a warning that says, are you sure you want to submit? That will hopefully prompt you to say no if you did it by mistake. But again, all your work's being saved all the time. This is a big improvement from Ezra, so that's good to report, but it will be something to pay attention to. The next key point here is, just like Ezra, don't leave anything blank. If there is no response for that area, just enter a 0. The system only accepts numbers. There's no text. Make sure when you're putting numbers in, you just put the number in, no commas, periods, dollar signs, any of that. It's just the number with nothing else. And then when you are all ready to submit your report, you will be prompted to validate and correct anything that may be wrong. And then I will show you some of these other areas instead of reading them off to you. So the only area that has a save feature is this little comments area at the very top. If you would like to leave a note for the conference, or leave a note that will be visible to a church user who might come back the next year, Anything that you feel might be useful, there is a box here at the top that will accept a brief note. And when you are done entering that information, there is a little save link here. So if you click in here and type something, just make sure you click save when you're done to save that note. When you initially start out, the first thing that you do should be to print out your statistical reports. Printing them out here will give you a will give you your statistical report, and most importantly, it will show what was reported last year for comparison. So before you hit print, go down here where it says display question help, and I will scroll up a little bit to show you what the difference is. When you are looking at the lines, you are just seeing at this point just the line titles. If there is a subtitle or just kind of a information underneath the title itself, that will be shown in gray right below. But when you click on this display question help, you will see immediately now the full descriptions of every line will show. You definitely want to toggle that, and so that it's shown before you print out the statistical reports. That way, whoever is using it will have the full questions there, or full question descriptions there and available. So make sure you toggle that first. After you toggle that to show all the instructions and descriptions, you're going to want to go to this print button. When you click on it, make sure you're clicking right in the middle of the button. The reason I'm saying that is if you go over here and click on the down arrow, it will pop out an option to print a blank report. If you want to do that, great. That's kind of a limited usage. You probably want to just print the report because it will show the previous year's values. So I'm going to click print. And as my browser is thinking here, the reason I'm showing you the print process is not to bore you to tears. It is to let you know that almost all browsers nowadays have a print to PDF format or option in addition to the printer list of printers that you happen to have there in your home or in your office. Typically, it's at the very top of the list of printers. In this case, I'm using Microsoft Edge. I know that Chrome has it as well. It's typically the top printer. It says save as PDF. I bring up this to let you know that if you are going to be distributing your statistical reports to folks in your church or committee chairs via email, this is the time to take advantage of this. The first time you print this, I would just save it as a PDF somewhere where you'll remember it, and then you can email that to others. After you've saved it as a PDF, you can then print it out on your printer and have a hard copy. So that is the recommended first thing that you do. Distribute it to whoever you need. As I'm scrolling down here, you will see the navigation area at the top of the statistical reports. There's a change from Ezra. Ezra had a separate screen for each table. If you click table 1, table 2, table 3, Ezra had a similar navigation area. It would jump you away from that table into a separate screen. This system is one continuous screen that has all of the tables back to back to back. So when you click on one of these buttons, I'm going to click on table 2, it should scroll you down. I think it's not doing it because this is a test church, but it should just scroll you down to where that table begins in the list. And I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of table 1. So you can see the next table, or if you have a worksheet, will show as a solid black bar across the top. You can see table 2 is starting here. And again, this is all on the same page. I'm just scrolling down the page and it's all one continuous page. As you enter your statistics, just like in Ezra, that top line is the only line that's going to be filled out for you because it is pre-filling the ending membership count from the past year. So that should be pre-filled and it should not be editable. As you go down through table 1, first section is all about professing membership. The questions, and I'm going to refer to questions kind of as their titles because we both have different question numbering systems. First question is members received through confirmation.
Dave, I'm going to interrupt you a quick second. We have almost 800 people on the call, and we've gotten a lot of questions about the registration and the sign-in and the login. And before you get into the tables, if it's okay, I'd like to answer some of those questions just because I don't want to get too far away from them.
No, fire away.
That's a reporting question, just a minute. So once again, how will people access the new site? Is it through GCFA? Is it through BWC? Or as I understand, is it through this, they can just go to stats.gcfa.org?
That's correct. So it's the last one. So stats.gcfa.org.
And I've put that link in the chat, everybody. So you should be able to open up the chat just to receive broadcast messages. Although you can't interact on the chat, I'll drop websites and whatnot that Bill and Dave referenced. So that website is in the chat. So that's how you can directly get into that. So let's see. The feature for the GCNO, where will people be able to find the GCNO if they're a member of the Baltimore-Washington Conference?
So for Baltimore-Washington Conference, and need to move some Zoom things out of the way. So the web address for the Baltimore-Washington Conference is bwcumc.org/stats. And that will take you to the statistical report page. The first part of my demo that I'm covering now is all covered for us by the AC Stats setup guide. That's a downloadable resource here. In that guide and on our webpage as well, there is a link that will help you look up your general church number. We will probably be emailing that to you as well, just to kind of cover all our bases. I believe Bill is also emailing that to churches. So there should be multiple ways that you're going to receive that. If you don't have the information, you can look it up using the tool we have a link to. You can call your district administrator. They certainly can look it up for you very quickly as well. Or if you have a church administrator or a finance person, there's a very good chance that they have that number memorized or written down somewhere as well.
And so just for clarity, so far, nothing has been sent to provide login information for people.
Not via email. It's just been posted online.
Just posted, not on email. So those who've asked that question, that covers that.
Yeah, that will go out tomorrow for us. And Bill, have you all sent yours as well?
We have not. We anticipate that going out either tomorrow or Thursday at the latest. And in that email will actually be a copy of the 3 tables with header information filled out, and their GCFA number will be in that header information.
Yep, and we will be doing something very similar. We'll have the setup guide, and it will have your GCNO as well. So we're going to try to, we realize this is all of a new process. We're going to try to hit you with that number as many possible ways that we can. So
when you go to that registration screen, the email you use, is it your church email or your personal email, or does it matter?
That's a great question. So that will definitely be your personal email, because that is the going to become the username when you log in. Once you've created that account with your own password, then moving forward, when you log into your church, you don't have to use that universal GCNO number anymore and the universal password. You can use your email as the username and then the password that you set up in the system when you first set up that account. So when you
by universal password, is that universal to every single church in the annual conference, or universal to just your congregation?
Every single church in the annual conference.
Okay.
And for us, Make
And
sure.
should, as you're going through that, the address you put in that registration, should it be your personal address or your church address?
Personal address is fine. And again, that is the address is optional. Really, the key pieces of information are, and these are required: your first and last name, your email, and your telephone number, and then your position at the church.
And now this one's from the Peninsula Delaware Conference. You talk about position. Are there selected positions? Like they're asking, will the finance chair be a position available, or do you just put in? Is it a blank? Is it blank enough that you can put in any position?
I believe there is a other, if your specific position is not listed. It's not super critical. I think the position is more listed just so that if the conference staff needs to reach out to you, if they see there's an issue with your statistical reports, they'll see who submitted it, and we can look up the user and we'll know what your role is in the church. So
and who authorizes users to, if let's say I'm the pastor of the local church and I want 5 people to be able to log in, do I have to do anything to authorize them, or who does that piece?
You can just distribute to whoever you would like helping you with your statistics. I would distribute that GCNO, the general church number, and the password for your conference. For Baltimore-Washington conference, it's stats 2022 with an exclamation point. Pendel has their own. So that's really all that's required. You don't have to pre-register anybody for your church. You can just distribute that information and tell them to self-register on the website.
Okay. And how soon can people begin logging into the new stats, AC Stats site?
System for us will be live tomorrow at about 8. Bill, are you live already? Or are you?
No, we won't be live until Monday, the 16th, because we have information that gets uploaded, and it'll take us that long to upload it.
Okay. I think I'm gonna go back through. There's a slurry of information, so carry on, and you may get to answer some of the questions. Some people are getting ahead, so carry on.
Sure. So going down through table 1, you'll see the previous year's information in the left-hand column, and your current information is in the right. Again, as I'm going through here, I'm going to enter in just a number for professions of faith through confirmation and click tab. Again, as soon as you tab out of any field that you're typing in, that information is saved. There's no need to save everything as you go or save whenever you've completed doing your data entry. So you do not feel like you have to do this all at one shot. If you have information for half of a table and you want to put it in and to have that knocked off your to-do list, you can just go in, log in, enter the information, and log out. As I mentioned before, because we're all kind of used to Ezra's system, you may be tempted to see this submit button, this green button with a little disk icon, and just be tempted out of habit to, okay, I've entered in some information, I'm going to click submit before I leave. Don't do that, because that is the final submission process at the very end when the church is ready to submit their statistics. So just be confident that as you go and tab through fields that this information is being saved. So you don't need to worry about saving. If you don't see help under each line, make sure you use that, again, that toggle, the display question help. I'll do it here just so you can kind of see the difference. Another way to show the information for a line or description of a line is you can click on the line number itself is a hyperlink, and will pop up in a window that may be a little bit easier to see in the middle of the screen, that will show you the help for that line. So that's just another way of showing you the same information. So the information that's shown here, this is affirmation of faith, is the exact same information that's showing underneath the line. So if you have the question description shown, don't feel like you have to go through and click on each line number to display it. And again, that's also the importance of toggling that and displaying that information before you print your stats or print them to a PDF file, because that will all then be displayed next to each line. As you go through on table 1, you are given the opportunity to enter in the new professing members received through various means. The first line is through confirmation. Second line is other than through confirmation. Those are professions of faith. Affirmations of faith is directly below that. If there is an issue, as I mentioned before, this number from the previous year is pre-filled. You can't change it. However, if you have realized that looking at the line and say, hey, there's no way that we only had 20 members, that's supposed to be 30. There are 2 areas in table 1 where you can add or subtract the member count from the previous year. So in this case, if I want to add to the previous year's reporting, it will say correct previous year's reporting errors by addition. There's no negative numbers that can be put into the system. So there's its sister line is down here where it will say correct previous year's reporting errors by subtraction. So if you want to shave some numbers off of last year's number, this is where you would put it. In this case, I'm going to add 10 to last year's numbers, and that will change the total. As I'm putting these numbers in, I'll scroll down here so you can see at the bottom of this section, this number is going to be auto calculating as you go. So I'll put a number in here right next to it and removed by death, just so you can see. So I'm putting a 3 in there, and as soon as I click tab, that 35 has now changed to a 32 because it's members removed by death. So it's decreasing that total. So you will see this number changing as you go. If you're able to, depending on your browser, you might be able to actually tab into that. But just know you really can't change it. It's a read-only field, and it's an auto-calculated field. So you don't have to do anything. The system is tallying that up for you as you go. The other areas of that membership transferred in from other United Methodist churches, from non-United Methodist churches, removed by charge conference action, sorry. And then the subtractions from your professing membership, transferred out to a Methodist church, transferring out to a non-Methodist church, removed by death. So that is the top area that, again, is being auto-calculated. Once you have that number, so in this case, it's 32, it's now going to ask some breakout questions. So the first is, okay, what is the racial and ethnic makeup of those 32 people? So in this section, you'll see racial ethnic groups at the top, and it will walk you through the various racial and ethnic categories: Asian, African American, Hispanic. And again, this will tally as you go. This is one area that folks will get tripped up. They will get an error message if, for instance, my number at the right here, 32, if I've entered in all my various racial and ethnic groups and the tally down here is not 32, you will get a explanation that is required, and it will not let you submit your stats. So keep that in mind. If you can't submit your stats, it should tell you, hey, the racial ethnicity total is not matching your membership total, and it's prompting you to then go back and see where you may have misentered a figure. So similarly, membership gender is then the next section that will, again, should tally up the total membership count. I do want to point out that I believe about a year and a half ago, GCFA's review committee that sets the standards for statistics added a line kind of in an out of cycle time period, because we are in the very long quadrennium that we're in right now due to COVID. So the addition that they made is non-binary professing members. So that is available to you if your church wishes to record that. That's going to be right under male and female, so keep that in mind. Again, the gender total is going to need to match your professing membership total. So next, this becomes more important in the COVID times, but average attendance at principal weekly worship services. During COVID, GCFA made it clear and asked conferences to make it clear that they are looking at the average attendance for a church in a year. We realize that if a church is closed if we have an outbreak, if a church is closed for 5-10 weeks due to an outbreak, that should not artificially lower the average attendance for the church. So you will see the information in this line that says only use the weeks where you had full in-person service to in your average calculations. So just ignore instead of dividing your average attendance by 52 weeks, if you were closed for 10 of those weeks, you're going to take your average attendance and divide it by 42 instead of 52. So keep that in mind. That helps get true statistics for your church when it was open, full in business. But that said, worshiping online has become more and more important due to COVID. So number of persons online is an additional question. This threw some people when it was added because some folks were looking at this as a kind of a 1 + 1 = 2. Looking at, okay, this is my average attendance plus my worshiping online attendance should be tallying up somewhere to my total attendance for the year. So that is not the case. These are two completely separate categories. Because you may have online worship while your church is open for full in-person worship. You may have online worship when the church is closed. So these two numbers are not adding together to a total membership number. So keep that in mind that they're not going to be tallied together. Infant and children baptism is below this. This is, again, one of the automatic calculating fields. Number of baptized members who have not become professing members. This line and the line right below it, which is a constituency roll, have their own very specific definitions that is set forth by the denomination. In this case, someone has made a profession. They've been baptized, but they haven't made a full official profession of faith into the membership of the church. So that will define that type of person and persons to be reported there. Same goes with constituency. This number tends to be increasing as years go on with churches. We have more and more people attending church that may not be becoming members. So that's a constituency role. And then after this, it will jump into Christian formation and small group ministries. There are a lot of different categories and classifications here. I won't go through all of them, but the most important thing to keep in mind is when you are looking at these questions, pay close attention to when they're asking number of people in a group versus number of groups. There are questions that look very similar. So keep that in mind. You may have 2 VIM groups, but there's 50 people that participate in those 2 groups. So make sure you're looking at those keywords, what's a group versus not. So also keep in mind, and it should have in the instructions here, if you have, don't count people more than once. If you're reporting number of people in various groups, if it says number of people in XYZ groups and someone is in 3 different groups, that you're only reporting that person one time for that category. So keep that in mind. And again, this is an area where paying attention to the instructions is definitely going to be important. United Methodist Men, United Methodist Women, membership and budget is reported here. Missions, this is an area where I just mentioned. This one's asking number of UMVIM teams sent from the church. The second one right below it says number of church members participating in any UMVIM team. So again, just keep that in mind as you go through. Ministry engagement, this is another area where the first question here is total number of ministries for outreach. So the church may have a prison ministry and one other ministry. So that's 2 ministries. And then there's questions below: number of persons served by those ministries, number of persons from your congregation that are engaged in those ministries. So all these questions, the wording should be paid close attention to. For us, right below table 1, we have a special worksheet that is used to feed or calculate a question in Table 2. That is the next section for us. If you are Peninsula Delaware, the next section that you'll see is your Table 2. The system this year, if you have a special worksheet, it becomes Table 4, Table 5, depending on how many you have. And then you can put it in its correct order. So keep that in mind in case you're wondering why the table numbers go from 1 to 4 to 2 to 3. This is just the order that they're in on the screen. So this is our table worksheet for mission expenses. And from that point forward, you're going to drop down into Table 2, assets, debt, and expenses. And with that, if there is no other questions about Table 1 or new system questions that you want to hit me with, Bill, I will turn it over to Bill Westbrook.
A lot of questions about Table 1. First of all, is there any guidance as to how to count online attendance?
Online attendance has and continues to be tough. It's getting better as time goes on, but I would use, it depends on the tool that you're using. It will provide viewers. Typically, it's a viewer count. Tools like YouTube and some other streaming services have gotten better with unique viewers. So it is never going to be perfect just because of the ways and wonders of the internet. You may have somebody that comes online and watches something for 5 seconds and drops off. Depending on the service you use, that person may or may not be counted. So I would rely as best you can on whatever statistics that your streaming service, or if you're using Zoom, you might see a head count somewhere on Zoom. That's a very good and clear number. Streaming sometimes is a little less clear. So just rely on that and just know that it's not going to be perfect. Just do your best to provide the information that you have been provided.
And we also have a number of people who do hybrid worship and are wondering why they're not counting the online attendance as part of their in-person attendance, since it's all done simultaneously.
I believe during COVID, they understood that some of these things were going to be transitory, and they were looking, they meaning GCFA and the denomination, were looking at the best way to preserve the continuity of the statistics from prior years. And I believe this was the best guidance that they could come up with, knowing that churches have different ways that they worship now. Some of them are hybrid. But they still want to make a clear delineation between live in-person worship and online worship. Not to say that may change in future quadrenniums as things change, but currently that's the guidance.
And I think that's one thing people need to keep in mind is some of this information, some of these titles, some of these markers are not created by the Peninsula Delaware Conference or the Baltimore-Washington Conference, but created by the General Council and Finance and Administration for the entire denomination. And so they're trying to create some general categories that may be more specific as you boil down to a particular annual conference. So we just ask people to keep that in mind, that is done in broader brushstrokes. So I'll continue to call through the questions and let you all continue, because I know there's a lot more information to get to. I would add, if we don't get to your question tonight, both Dave and Bill's emails are on the respective conference websites, but I always suggest to reach out to your district administrator or your district AA as a first line of questions. So carry on.
Okay, am I sharing the screen, Bill? Do you know?
Yes.
Okay. So the Peninsula Delaware Conference has a little different numbering system than Baltimore-Washington. Our assets begin with line 24, and Baltimore-Washington begins with line 36, and then they just sequentially move down. So for the market value of church-owned lands and buildings, vehicles, this is all property that's owned by the church. Even the parsonage is included in these items. And notice that it says market value. I know sometimes it's suggested that you might look at the declarations pages of your insurance policies to come up with some kind of a value. But in most instances, that insurance is based on a replacement cost, and that usually is slightly higher or can be significantly higher than what the market value of the church property is at any given time. So you might, if you have some real estate people, you might want to get some advice on the difference in value between the replacement cost and the market value to judge how much the church property and parsonages actually are rated for. Then on 25 is the market value of any financial assets. It includes all your bank accounts, any kinds of stock, securities, investments that you might have. Line 26 is any debt that is secured by your assets, usually in the form of a mortgage. And then 27 is any other debts that would be unsecured against church property. So then we move to 28 and 28A and B. These are mission shares or apportionments. 28A is the conference apportionment that's been assigned to your church, and 28B is the district apportionment, if you have a district apportionment assigned to your church. Then we move down to 29A and B, and these are the actual amounts paid during the year for both the conference and the district. And then this is the area that I spoke about for the Peninsula Delaware people. Beginning with line 30, the general advances, all of these items down to 36F are items that are associated with our benevolence remittance form that treasurers are familiar with and send in to our office along with apportionment payments. And these are the lines that we will automatically upload, and they will be pre-filled. You won't be able to change them, but what we ask is that you then take a look at those and make sure those numbers match what your records show. So general advances, World Service specials, those are items that go to the general church. Annual conference advance specials stay within the annual conference. You have the youth service fund, and then other funds that were sent to the conference and connectional ministries is line 34 for us. Annual conference, if you have special Sunday offerings, they would go on line 35. And starting with line 36A, these are the 6 special Sundays that are collected at the general church level. That include Human Relations Sunday, Course Sunday, which used to be One Great Hour of Sharing, Peace with Justice, Native American Ministries Sunday, World Communion Sunday, and United Methodist Student Day offering. Then beginning on line 37, these are items that the benevolence items that the local church has paid directly. If it's to another United Methodist institution or a cause, it would be on line 37. If it's a benevolent to a charitable organization outside the United Methodist Church, it would go to 38.
Hey, Bill.
Yes.
While you're there, I just wanted to point out, again, we have 2 different conferences, 2 different systems. Because we started a little bit earlier in general, this is a little bit closer this year, but because we are typically starting first week in January, those lines, you will see those lines in the new statistical reporting system. However, you will see them, all of them will have a little conf, C-O-N-F icon next to them. And underneath the line, it will say this will be provided or uploaded by the conference. And for us, those lines are going to, they're big visible, but you can't actually do any data entry into the line. We typically will upload that information after statistics are completed That way we're not doing it in the middle of the cycle and having it one day it's there, or one day it's not there, and one day it's there. So for us, right as the statistics reporting area is wrapping up, that will be uploaded. So just keep that in mind. Nothing needs to be put in for us, and for Bill and Peninsula Delaware, you should see that information in there already.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Now, for I think both conferences, this is where we begin with line items that are directly related to apportionment calculations or mission share calculations. For us, it starts with 39, which is the pension that is billed for our local pastors. Line 40 is the health insurance benefit that is billed to the local church. And then we move down to the base compensation for the senior pastor, associate pastor, and any deacons that are appointed to your church. So they are in line 41, 41B, and 41C. Then 42A begins with housing. So 42A, and this is one of those ones where Peninsula Delaware Conference has added a few. So we have subcategories of parsonage maintenance and utilities, parsonage rental, and housing allowance. But 42A, the housing benefit in a whole, that's going to be reported by both annual conferences. Same with 42B for the associate pastors. We subcategorize that by parsonage maintenance and utilities, any parsonage rental, and housing allowance. And then again, 42C would be housing associated with a deacon that would not have been included in 42B. '43, this is another one again where Peninsula Delaware separates out some accountable reimbursements. We track travel, continuing education, moving expenses, and other accountable reimbursements. So when you fill out in Pendel, when you put items in 43A, 43B, 43C, and 43D, they will automatically be summed into 43. So you will not have an opportunity to put a number in 43. But in Baltimore-Washington, that is the line that you will actually enter all your data in. Then 44 is any other cash allowances that are provided for your clergy. Some pastors, they prefer to have their travel paid in a monthly allotment and don't want to be bothered with travel logs or anything like that. In that case, it's considered a cash allowance. So that amount would go in 44 as opposed to 43 when they supply that mileage and get reimbursed for their mileage. 45 is all of the salary and benefits associated with all other staff persons on your payroll. And then 46 and 47, again, are items where the Peninsula Delaware tracks some specific areas. And again, when it comes with A through E and 46, you will fill out those blocks, and line item 46 will automatically be tallied, but Baltimore-Washington will fill out line 46. Same with line 47, which is the local church operating expenses. In the program expenses, we divvy it up between church school, worship-related items, and then council on ministries and program-related committees and the work that they do. On 47, it's basically your office and building occupancy items and any administrative committees that you have on your church. But one of the things that we wanted to point out, and one of the reasons why we separated out routine maintenance on all buildings, with the exception of the parsonage, which would be in 41, is, as Dave mentioned, we run all the way through 47 for calculating our apportionment. So line 47 is included in the apportionment. And I'll just go down to the next two items, which are 48 total paid on principal and interest on indebtedness, and then 49, which is the amount paid on capital expenditures for building and improvements. What we found over time is some people will include major items as routine building and maintenance items, so that in any given year, line 47 can be skewed tremendously. So what we recommend is looking at your expenditures, and we're looking for items that are mostly done on an annual basis. So if it's a repair that you're generally doing, a small repair, that would be routine. If you're doing major repairs, that would most likely be in the capital improvements. So you would be looking at putting that in 49. Some examples might be a large church wanting to keep up on its maintenance. They might paint a classroom every year, but you might have a small church that their entire building is one room and they paint the entire building. For the large church, that would be a routine maintenance because they expect it year in and year out. For the small church, that would be a capital expenditure because it's fairly sizable compared to their normal maintenance budget. So that's why we kind of break that out so that we can make sure that that we can question some of the items that go in there so that the apportionment calculation can be relatively flat over time. So again, 48 is the principal and interest on indebtedness for loans and mortgages. 49 is the capital expenditures. 48 and 49 are not included in the calculation of apportionments, and that's why that classification is critical between 47 and 49. So now I'll move on to table 3, which was the income side. The very first item is the number of giving units. So this is one that you kind of have to work with at your local church level. A given unit may not be just a single person. It could be a family or a household. So if you have a husband and wife and they give together combined, that's one giving unit. If you have a single individual and they give, that's also a given unit. So if you have a husband and wife and they both give separately, that would be 2 giving units. So you have to be cognizant of how many people are giving and whether it's in combination with other people, other family members. Then, as Dave had mentioned, the first part of this, lines 52, they're associated with income that you use for your budget, your annual budget and spending plan. So 52A is amounts received through pledges. So if your church goes through a campaign each year and asks for persons to pledge or estimate what they would give in the upcoming year, any payments towards those pledges, that would go in 52A. You may have persons in your church that have not pledged, but you definitely know who they are and you've identified them. Any payments received from them would go in 52B. In 52C, let's go back. 52C, amounts received from unidentified givers, is obvious. Most times people call that loose plate, which would be cash coming in from an offering. And then 52D is amounts received from interest and dividends and any other transfers from your liquid assets. And one thing you don't want to put in here is interest on money that's been set aside for capital campaigns. It's only interest that's available for your normal operating expenses. (52E) is the amount received from any sale of church assets. So if you have leftover computer equipment or something like that that you sell or have a yard sale, those kind of cash items would go in 52E. Amounts received through building rentals and use fees, that would be in 52F. And if you have fundraisers during the year, that would go in 52G. And they all get totaled up to line 52. So when you fill in A through G, line 52 will automatically be filled in. Then the next part is 53, and this is the capital campaign. So if you're undergoing a capital campaign, any pledges received towards that campaign would go in 53A. 53B would be for any bequests or memorials that you might receive during the year from persons that have passed away or persons that are memorializing somebody that has passed away. That would all go in 53B. 53C is sources of projects, including the sale of the buildings. So if you have excess capacity and are selling parts of your building, that would go in 53C. Of course, that would need to go through all of the processes associated with building sales that the discipline requires. 53B is one that you need to pay close attention to. Notice it says amounts received for special Sundays, general advance specials, all of those items that have been designated for specific items that were shown in lines 30 through 36. So if you have numbers in 30 through 36, 53D should have at least that amount, if not more. And again, then any of the A through Ds would be totaled for the line 53 and would automatically be entered. And finally, the other sources, 54A, if your church receives equitable compensation from the annual conference, the amount you receive in equitable compensation would go in 54A. Any amounts received through advanced specials, special apportionments, or connectional funding received from the church, that would go in 54B. And any other grants from outside financial institutions would go in 54C. And again, they would be all totaled up, the A through C, and line 54 would be automatically filled in for you, as well as line 55 that will also automatically be filled in based on all three of those totals. So the one thing I do want to stress is, again, since a lot of the numbers in Table 2 are used for conference apportionments, especially in the area of building maintenance versus capital improvements, pay particular attention to that. We're not here to audit your church, but what we do ask is if you make specific determinations on what will be considered routine maintenance and what will be considered capital kinds of expenses, that whatever you make, however you define that you define it and use it consistently from year to year, because we want to make sure that the apportionments are fairly steady from one year to the next and don't have spikes. So I think at this time, if we have some additional questions, we can open it up for questions.
For some reason, my computer decided to slow up, and it's been doing this. I think it's just because it's Training Tuesday. So let's go with an easy one, but it's one that's been asked a number of times. And a lot of people appreciate the how that you're providing, but a number of people want to know why. Why are we switching from Ezra? It took us 20 years to finally master Ezra, and now you're switching us from it.
I can take that one. So this is part of a overall technology refresh for the denomination. They are completely redoing the core database system that they are using to track everything in the denomination. The system that they're using is going to be much more user-friendly for conferences to keep their church and appointment information up to speed. It's going to present a very good feature for churches to see historical information on their churches. So the overall system is very good. However, Ezra, as it was custom programmed over 20 years ago, a lot of the core functions of Ezra were not compatible with some of the newer, more user-friendly systems that the denomination is rolling out. So they had to make the decision to bring everything up to speed at the same time, and that created the need to change Ezra to this new AC stat system.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, I would like to add too, maybe Dave, that I've been around long enough to see the transitions from GCFA from actually supplying their in-house software until Windows came along, and they didn't have the staff to be able to upgrade anything to Windows. And I think we're experiencing the same situation where there's just not enough staff at GCFA to keep up with the rapidly changing technological advances, and going to maybe some third-party persons that keep up on that kind of stuff helps them stay ahead of the game.
That's a great point.
A lot of questions came in. I know everybody's going to be sending out emails with login, with numbers, with instructions. Who will be getting that email? Finance chairs, treasurers, pastor? Who gets those emails? And is it annual conference specific?
We were going to include the pastor and finance chair and treasurer and church administrator. I think Peninsula Delaware is similar. Bill, you correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, we'll actually be doing two emails. We'll be doing one with the forms, and that will go out to the pastor and the treasurer. But when we announce the actual opening of the statistics, that will go out to the pastor, treasurer, and the finance chair.
And what are the respective annual conference due dates / deadlines for submission of statistical reports?
For us, I believe, I need to look at my calendar.
Us meaning who?
The Baltimore-Washington conference, ours are due at midnight on the 8th of February, which is a Wednesday. So it's a 4-week period.
Okay, so February 8th for the Baltimore-Washington conference at midnight. And Bill, how about the Peninsula Delaware conference?
We generally extend it because we're not up until after mid-January to February 28th.
So for Peninsula Delaware, February 28th. Thank you, gentlemen. Some technical questions. You talked a lot, Dave, about every time you hit tab, it will save the data in the field. What if you use a mouse to move between fields?
If you are, that's a great question. So if I click into a field and enter a number, if I click into another field, the second it's the equivalent of hitting the tab key. So as soon as the system recognizes that you've moved out of a field that you were just putting information in, it will save that piece of information, regardless of whether that's done with a tab key or a mouse click.
Thank you. And several people have asked in previous iterations, there was the ability to report missions that were not necessarily VIM, like Appalachian Service Project. Is there a place to do that any longer, or are they just receiving official VIM trips?
The questions definitely have not changed. They are, I think, 3 different classifications of ministry activity. VIM is the only mission program that's actually asked by name. The others are simply asked by category. So whatever that activity falls into category wise is where you would put that.
Okay. And how about mission expenses? Can you those have been I know in the Baltimore-Washington conference, those have been calculated so that they don't count against mission shares. I know that there was a utility expense sheet we've done in the past so that portions of our buildings in the Baltimore-Washington conference at least could be calculated as mission spending. Is that still applicable in this new system? And has anything changed with like the utility expense sheet?
The methods and ways of declaring those missional expenses for either conference have not changed. The worksheet is a little bit different in that you don't have to jump out of table 2 to enter that information. I believe both, well, I can speak for the Baltimore-Washington conference in that however it's calculated or rolled up in the conference statistics, money spent on missional activities is not part of the apportionment or mission share calculation.
Thank you. And what's the best way to get to the market value again? Do you use the tax assessment? Is there a better way to do it? I'll let either of you answer.
Bill, you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, the absolute most efficient way to do it would be to actually have an appraisal done, a market value appraisal, but that can tend to be costly. So again, if you look at your declarations page in your insurance, it should have a value associated there, but that's typically higher. And what you could do is talk with someone in real estate to determine, what a building might cost versus that declarations page value, and use that proportion to determine what your market value is going to be for your building. But the absolute best way to do it would be through an official appraisal.
Okay, now these are just kind of random. If the conference, for line 41, if the conference pays the pastor, is that number filled out by the annual conference, or does a local church still fill that out?
For us,
Baltimore-Washington conference.
I'm sorry, for Baltimore-Washington
Okay.
conference, I'll get this right by the end of the webinar. So for Baltimore-Washington conference, if the pastor, if there's a portion of his or her pay that is being provided by the conference, we ask that that's not reported in the table 2 and the total salary for the pastor. That amount should be recorded on the income side of things as it's brought in. If it's a grant or equitable compensation, that's where we ask that it's recorded.
And where,
Bill, are you similar?
No, we're different
Okay.
because we pay any kind of equitable comp. We generally don't pay the pastors, with the exception of lay pastors, so the proper taxes can be withheld, and then the church reimburses us for that. So the full compensation for the pastor is recorded
Okay.
as compensation, and then any income that they received would be part of this 54A for the equitable comp. So they received equitable comp in order to underwrite the expense.
so as long as the income from whatever the source is goes up against the expense, then it's a wash. Now, there are a number of people with the different numbers. Different numbers between annual conferences, and some people had some challenge following. If someone has a specific question, who's the best person to reach out to? Where would they start?
So for us,
we're not going to get to all the questions that are coming in. I can guarantee you that tonight.
So for the Baltimore-Washington conference, and I would assume Pendel as well, the district administrators should be the first point of contact. There's certainly more of them than there is of Bill and I. So you will probably get a faster response. We typically stand ready to back them up if it's a more technical question that they can't put their fingers on. So we would encourage you to go that route,
Excellent.
as well as our any web resources that are available.
And there will be a lot of questions answered in the web resources.
And
So-
I would also add to, in case it was not heard, the line numbers, although they vary between the conferences, the actual questions that are asked in both conferences for table 1, 2, and 3 are all standard questions set forth by the denomination. In the case of Pendel, they just break out with more granularity some of the line numbers. But if you're looking at the line, I'm seeing Bill's PowerPoint. If you're looking at that actual line title, that should line up very closely with ours as well. It's just that the line number on the left is going to be different.
Thank you. We're going to have to wrap it up on that, just because a lot of the questions are church specific or annual conference technical specific. So I want to appreciate everybody whose questions came in, for the feedback and suggestions of how to improve the webinars for future use. So want to appreciate that from everybody. Want to really thank Dave and Bill for taking the time to walk us through this. And I know you continue to provide information that will be on each conference website as it relates to the each particular annual conference. So thank you very much for everybody who has been walking with us through this. Thank you. I know it's a lot of information and it's a lot of technical information, and it is important. And so again, as you have questions, please reach out to your district administrators. They will be able to connect with Bill and Dave as appropriate, and everybody's contact information is on the respective annual conference websites. And just as well, this recording, so you can watch it a little slower and go back and rewind, will be available hopefully by the end of this week for both annual conferences. So again, thank you all very much for joining us tonight, and have a wonderful rest of your evening, and good night.